Welcome to Conversations with Educators. I am your host, Jerome Ellison, and I have a special guest today, Arun Antonyraj. Thank you, Arun, for coming on the show.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to start with a quick game. This game is called Start, Bench, or Cut. So I give you three topics. The one that you like the most, you start. It's like a team, right? You start, they're in the starting lineup. The one that's good, but not the favorite, gets benched. And the one that's not your favorite at all, they get cut. Like they can't make the team at all this year. All right. Okay. So the three topics are, so if everything was to open up tomorrow, right? Everything's open back up to normal, like 2019. Would you buy tickets to a concert? Would you buy a ticket to a flight or buy a ticket to get on a cruise? Your first thing you buy. Which one would you start, bench, or cut?
The second one was fly.
Flight, yep.
Flight. Okay, I'd probably start the flight.
Okay.
I'd bench the wait, what was the first? The concert.
Concert.
Mm-hmm. I'd bench the concert, and then I'd cut the
cruise.
The other one.
Okay.
Cruise, yeah.
All right, makes sense. Okay, cool. So let's get into it. So these are like some reflective questions. So my first big question is, why did you become a teacher? What got you into the field of education?
So I kind of chose the profession for a few different reasons. I think when I went to undergrad, in retrospect, I realized that I was just one of those people that just like showed up in undergrad because I was just supposed to be there. Like I'd never thought about it before. It was just kind of like everybody goes, so you went too. And I spent 4 years like super confused and just kind of assuming, like I remember being like, oh, I should probably study computers. That's what other people are doing. And I got to college, hated it, felt really lost. And then I started thinking about like how I wanted my life to just be like on the day to day. And I started to notice like I graduated college in 2005 and it was like right when like Google, Facebook, all these things were like blowing up. I kind of realized that it sounds like for the most part, a lot of us are going to spend our time staring at computer screen. and I was kind of excited about the idea of teaching because I was like, okay, well, this is a job where that's going to be hard to do that most of the time because most of the time you're moving around, talking to kids. So it forces you not to kind of be stuck to a screen all the time. And for the most part, that's actually been true up until now.
I was thinking that same thing, yeah.
Like that's been the hardest thing for me right now is that I feel like I got into teaching to do this other thing where I was like moving around a lot, talking to people a lot. It makes the time go by so fast, or so much faster to me than most other types of work that I had done. And so when I was tutoring in college, it felt really good. I just started kind of leaning into the fact that this feels good to me. It feels really fun to do. And then you kind of have to shelve the other things, right? It's not, I think at the time, I think my parents were really concerned about whether it would be just a job that pays well enough, and they're both educators, so they understand the importance of the work, but, they also had these feelings about the way doing the kind of job that we do is treated in American culture. But getting past all that, it really just felt really good. And I always feel really fortunate that it felt right from the beginning, and I didn't end up having to struggle much with after I got kind of on solid ground with it after the first few years. I felt like, yeah, this felt good. I didn't really ever like doubt that this was like the right thing for me to be doing. I mean, everyone has their ups and downs with it, I think. But overall, it's always felt like a profession that's felt at home to me in some way or another.
Very true. You made a great point. Like I think part of the reason why I also got into it is like you're active, you're involved with kids, you can be sociable with your students and build relationships with your students, and you're not on a screen or in a cubicle all day long. And now remote learning, it feels like we go into our cubicle in our house all day long, and it's like the routine is so consistent, the same thing over and over, and you lose the joy of like that spontaneity, like the different things that happen when you're in a building, when you're interacting with kids, and you never know what's going to happen in your day. Now it's pretty much like the same thing happens every day, and the time drags a lot of times with remote learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you spoke about a lot of the challenges that we have right now in remote learning. So, but outside of that, this year, what has been your biggest challenge as a teacher, especially as a teacher of color, a male teacher of color, especially?
Outside of just being in remote.
Yeah, outside of the pandemic year.
Outside of the pandemic, I think the pandemic kind of happened right at the same time that, you know, that there was another series of like tragic events that highlighted a very like different problem that we have to deal with as we think about learning, and as we think about just people trying to figure out how we're going to build the type of society we actually want, the type of society that feels inclusive, you know, the type of society that corrects past wrongs, you know, and takes responsibility for things that we've done and that we continue to do. And I think that kind of, the fact that it happened during the pandemic in a way allowed so many people to focus on it, you know, because people were able to talk about it in a different way. People's times were freed up in a unique way that people never get. And so I think it opened up space for people to start to engage in conversation and actions that had never happened before. And it also forced, I think, us as educators to really look at this system that in some ways it's like, oh, we're not doing the things that we used to be able to do, but in many ways the things we were doing were not solving it.
Very true.
So you know, all of a sudden standardized tests just disappeared, right? It just went away, which to me kind of reveals how valueless they were to begin with, right? Like they were never the thing that was that important. If all of a sudden they're like out the door.
Yes, I was thinking about that. Yeah.
So there are these like there are these opportunities, I think, that I feel come up every now and then where you can try and reach for more. And I think that's one thing that's been hard at my school, is that I think there has been such an effort at my school to try and do that. But the problem with trying to do that in a pandemic is that everyone is overextended in a job we were already overextended to begin with. And so I think like that gets to a lot of messiness, and it's not anybody's fault. It's just the system is really complicated, and it's not set up to take care of children. Like it's not really set up to take care of all children, really give all children what they need. And so in a pandemic, it just lifts up all of those things. And that's really hard, but it also forces us to look at it. Because sometimes when we're just doing our normal routine, we can just kind of ignore that, even though that it's happening every day. Like one example I use a lot, because I think about it a lot because it drives me nuts, is that sometimes there are kids in my class who are hungry, right? And it's like, that sounds like a thing that doesn't seem like a big deal, but to me it's a huge deal, because if we can't even make sure that every kid is like fed, if I can't even ensure that, if I don't even know that, the whole thing kind of becomes a farce afterwards, right? It's like, do we really care about kids? How much do we really care about kids? And that's not because teachers don't know that. It's because teachers are told all the time that that's not possible somehow, that somehow we can't have a society where every kid comes to school with more of their basic needs met. And that part of it, I think, is much more like on display right now than it ever has before. And so it forces us to say, like, are we going to have that conversation? Are we going to really try and deal with that part of it?
You hit so many great points. I mean, like you said, like that basic foundational need, if we're not meeting their foundational needs, then everything that we try to throw on top of that is going to crumble because this foundation isn't strong. So I think during this pandemic, we started to see what are the foundational needs. Like we couldn't hide from it. It's right there in our face, right? We have to make sure socially, emotionally that our kids are doing well. Right? We have to make sure that they're coming to school well fed, right? That they have a place that they feel safe in the school building. We have to make sure that we're not focusing on things like the standardized test, which all these years we've been told we have to do it, we have to do it, we have to do it. But now in the pandemic, we can take it away. So is it really valuable, or can we find other ways to assess students and assess teaching, right? So I think if we really sit back and look at it from, like, really look closely at what's going on right now, I think we can really identify the things that need to be changed within the system. And now it's about really caring enough to make change and putting the resources behind it to actually create that long-term change that we know is needed, because all of those things, inequality, inequity in schools, lack of support for certain kids with special needs, all those things have reared its head to the forefront. And now we really have to address it when we go back, when things actually get back to normal.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So my next question, so we talked about the challenges. What is your proudest moment that you ever had as a teacher? When you look back at it, it always puts a smile on your face.
Oh, man. I think there was this moment, I don't know if this is the most proud thing, but it's the thing that stands out to me. There was this moment when I was in like my 3rd or 4th year of teaching, and I had, at that point in my career, I felt really good because I had gone from like a classroom in my 1st year that just felt like a circus. I mean, it was just one of those classrooms where I felt like I had no agency and no control and no, like, not the right community that I wanted. And then I became this super strict teacher. It was just like, I just went from one extreme to another almost because I was just like overcompensating.
How to survive.
But it felt good. Like, kids were quiet in my room, they were learning. And then there was this one day where I was like late to class by 10 minutes. And I was just like really worried because I was at a school where I wasn't sure how well an administrator would deal with that, you know, and it was like, I was remembering the nightmare classroom that I had, you know, my 1st year and what kids were doing. And I remember running down the hall, and then like I got to the classroom and all the kids were just doing what they normally would do. And it was just a moment that like, it forced me to like reevaluate how I was approaching kids. And like, it started turning around this thing of like, your relationship with them doesn't have to be adversarial, and it doesn't have to be like domineering. And it's much more organic when kids are just doing things because they're invested with you, you know, and that they understood what to do for the first 10 minutes of class, and they could do it on their own. And I think I still strive to like build classrooms where that's the case, where kids believe in the systems we come up with, so that they actually follow through them on their own. And then we can have a lot more fun and have a much, you know, I think we can just learn more, and kids feel really good when they're learning. Like I think when they learn a lot, they're really proud of themselves, and that feeling is something that they take on with them. You know, that it's powerful, the idea that you can do something, that you can learn something, that you can deal with something that's complex and come out on the other end of it feeling really good. And it taught me that I have a lot to learn, you know, and that there isn't this, because I thought like I had figured it out, and then I realized, oh, there's no figuring it out. There's just the willingness to engage in a cycle of learning every day, and a willingness to understand that it's okay if you don't have all the answers, and it's okay if you know, if you're not in control all the time, because you're actually not in control all the time. Because there's 30 other people usually who have their own ideas and their own thoughts and have their own right to ownership of the room that you're in. And I think that was something that's something I still struggle with, you know, with kids, like everybody else. But it reminds me that it's okay to struggle with that. And it's okay to continue to work on this complicated relationship that you're forced into when you become a teacher. Not forced into, but the parts that feel forced, like ideally 30 of them is a lot, you know, to try and get to know. So there are things that are outside of your control, but that's part of, you know, that's part of learning, and that's part of doing our jobs.
Very true. Very true. I think that's such a great point. I feel like the term lifelong learner is always something you hear in the field of education, in undergrad, grad school, etc. And it's so true. Like, you really look at it, like, you never have this job mastered. You're always the best teachers are the ones who are constantly learning, constantly growing, and view themselves as learners and understand that, so that they're constantly growing, and then view students as learners and know that they're constantly growing in their areas as well. And we're just in that process together, constantly learning and growing and learning and growing. That's the beauty of this job. Thank you for sharing that. So my next question is, if you look back to your childhood in schools, right? Which teacher would you say was your favorite, was your most memorable, or had that impact on you where you felt so comfortable in in their class to grow and learn and take risks?
Um, there's two, and they're my 7th and 8th grade teachers, and they worked as a pair. So I had the same teachers, same like two main teachers for 7th grade and 8th grade. I went to a Catholic school, and it was pretty small. It was like there was only like 30 kids in each grade, and so Mr. Borowick, he taught science and social studies, and Miss Barone, she taught math and English, and also our religion class. And I always think back to them because my sister also had both of them, and so there was like this familial connection in my experience, and she was older than me. So it felt like these people who like really understood not just like me, but also my family. And so by the time I got to their classes, I felt understood by them in a way. And I had lots of great teachers, but in a way that was really unique. And I think with Mr. Borwick, I really learned a lot about how to balance like building a level of discipline with kids in a classroom so that we're committed to learning, but also having fun. And I just remember like the way he would tell stories, and the way he would also build relationships with kids outside of whatever was going on in the classroom. Like I was a really big hockey fan as a kid, and he took me to a hockey game, and I just thought that was like so interesting. Like I didn't even think that was something people did, you know. And it also felt like for me, like I grew up, you know, like I moved to the United States when I was 5. Like being an immigrant, the feeling that like you're new here was always this thing that kind of was like overhanging. Not in a good or bad way. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, your parents don't have this like cultural history that a lot of other folks seem to have. So I probably would never have gone to one, you know, otherwise. And so and I learned a ton. I mean, I think that was the thing. Like I still remember how much I learned from him. And then with Miss Barone, we did this, the way we had literature class with her was just like, we would read whatever books we wanted. Like she would give us like a list and you'd have to read like different types of books. And then you would just journal with her every week. And then she would like write back to you. And now as a teacher, like I still have those journals. And when I flip through them, I'm just like blown away at how much attention she paid. Like she would write like pages and pages back to me. And when I think about it, she was doing that for 30 kids.
Hours and hours outside of work.
Hours of reading, right? And it always felt so personal. And I think about that now, and I think about how I think about learning and teaching, and it's always personal. Like the job is like so personal because teaching kids math, for example, ultimately starts with understanding, for me, where each kid is at. Because I have to understand what they're coming to or coming with so that I can work with them. And I think with her, I just remembered how good it felt as a student when someone was really like personally caring for me. And I think like that's what kids need and that's what kids want. And when I think about the work that we do, I think about how much the system makes it really hard for me to be able to have a personal relationship with a kid so I can work with them in a meaningful way. And that's how I know the system is problematic, is because it's making it difficult for me to do the part of the job that I think has the most leverage. And sometimes I think it feels like when we talk about progressive ideas, there's this idea that, well, how will kids be accountable? But, you know, like that seems to be always a thing. And my problem with that is that I think we're missing the part that has the highest leverage to be accountable. If you want kids to grow, I really feel like we need to do that part, and we need to make things more personal, and we need to really get to know kids and create opportunities in schools to get to know kids. And that probably means like not having 30 kids in one room most of the time.
Yeah.
That's just a thing. It's not the only thing. You need
Not
lots
the only thing.
More counselors in school, right? Like that so that we can get to know kids more personally, so we can understand kids better, so we can, as a system of caregivers, we can learn about kids better and then actually give them the things that they need so that they can be more successful. And And it takes time to do that. And sometimes it always feels like we're under the gun a little bit.
Yeah.
Like never any time to stop and do the thing that we need to do to actually move against. And that seems absurd to me. Like this, it's like, well, we can't do that because we have to get them to choose the right multiple choice answer. And it's often the way it seems like conversations are structured. And I think, you know, again, like the craziness that we're all in gives us this time to shake that up, you know, on top of potentially, you know, an administration we can work with that's a little bit better than one. So there are these spaces, you know, for us to kind of really try and like get some more leverage in the system, so that we can do the things that we really know are the things that kids want and kids need, so that they can be successful.
I think that's so great. I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. I think, and like you said, I think it starts from every teacher that I remember in my past as a child going through the education system was always the teachers who cared. I can't tell you what they taught me specifically, but I can tell you what they did to prove to me, to show me that they cared. And from that point, they had me, and I was able to open up and take risk and learn and be ready to learn anything that they wanted me and needed me to learn at that time. So I think we have to start from that point. Those relationships and building systems that allow us to show kids that we care, and have a support system built into the school that supports them throughout. But you kind of led to my next question. This segment is called Each One Teach One, and you talked about our current administration and how they're progressive on education and they want to listen to teachers and educators to create change. So if you had one advice to whether it's the Secretary of Education or whether it's Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever is making that decision, what would you tell them to focus on in order to create more diversity and equity in schools? What's one thing you think they should start with?
You know, I think like this is a really important time to double down on anti-racism work. And I think it would mean a lot if they could hold the line on that, because what we're seeing right now is an attack on anti-racism, right? Like as I flip through the news cycle, I see more and more articles coming, and it's not because anti-racism is perfect, right? But we need to continue to work on it and get better at it. But there is this movement to try and remove that from the conversation, right? Like we're getting pushback already that we're doing Black Lives Matter work in schools this month, right? And that's building. And I just think that this is such a good opportunity for someone with that type of leverage to really be really clear that this is what we stand for, after we've had 4 years of someone saying that actually racism is what we stand for, right? Essentially, right?
Essentially,
in so many different ways.
Basically.
That it could be an opportunity to say, no, we're doing the opposite. We're doing the very opposite of what that claim was, in trying to live up to the claims, right, that America wants to have versus the reality of never meeting those claims. And I think like from a really broad angle, that could be really, really helpful. And then to pump resources into that, right, to help people figure that out, because we're going to make mistakes and it's not going to be perfect. And when that happens, there are people who are going to point to that and try and rip apart all of it and say that it's wrong. And I think that's when we need to, like, again, double down and say, okay, it's not going to be perfect, but it's the right thing to do. And we get better at things by investing in them, not abandoning them because we haven't had success with them. So I think that's one big angle. And then the other thing is, like, to what degree can we really dump the standardized testing? You know, like, we've done it for so long, it has done nothing. And so that to me is just like, can we just walk away from it? Like, just move those resources into what many different, like lots of different research has suggested different ways we could invest in our communities. And I think like that's one big one that we could also do, that I would love to see them take a lead on.
Yeah, I love that. I think we have to look into other forms of assessment, because we had the data on standardized testing, and it's $1 billion industry, and we can put those funds to other places that can be more, we can get more return on our investment than we have from standardized testing over the years. And like you said, one thing that I think that really stood out was it has to be a long-term commitment, a long-term vision for anti-racism, because like you said, people will try to jump on any short-term mishaps and say, oh, it's not effective. but we have to show a commitment long-term and put the resources and support behind it long-term so we can have a long-term effect. Because so many times in education, and you know this, there's so many initiatives coming out every year, right? We try it for 2 months and get rid of it. Try it for 3 months and get rid of it. We don't really give it a chance to see if it can actually create change, right? So we have to be committed long-term if we really want to see if it's effective and work through it and believe in it so that we can make the changes to make it effective moving forward. You know?
Sure.
Yeah. So our last segment is called Choose Your Teachers Wisely. So this is just a chance for you to give a shout out to anyone. It can be a teacher, a colleague, a book, a vlog, a movie, a TV show, anything that has educated you and pushed you to become a better person. One person or one thing that you would give a shout out to.
This year I've been really thinking about James Baldwin a lot. I think he's someone who showed up in lots of different areas in my career, but it almost seems like every time I revisit his work or every time I read something that's a reflection about his work, it seems more and more powerful and more important and more, and like there's more here that I can learn from. You know, I think his work just speaks to this idea of how much depth there is when people are able to kind of reach their full potential in the things that they care about. And I think that working with kids, it reminds me that all kids deserve the opportunity to be able to express themselves with that same kind of depth. So I think that there's also I think so much that we could learn from his work in the work that we do. And as a society, I just think it would be great if more of us had a relationship with his work and what he was trying to share, because it seems like he was so ahead of the times in so many different ways, as a human, as a way that he reflected on the world. And it reminded me also just how important the humanities are, you know, how important just all of the opportunities that we have to express ourselves as people, especially people of color, especially in schools, right? Where else in school should people be empowered to express themselves, to investigate who they are, and then have the space to express who they are? And I think his work continues to kind of just to stand as a reminder that that's what we're committed to as people, and that's doubly what we're committed to as educators and trying to build for our school communities. And it's been a powerful like set of months just revisiting his work and having the time to kind of just read them for pleasure and reflect on my own role and all of our roles as teachers.
Yeah, I love that. Shout out to James Baldwin. Everything I watch of his, everything I read of his, like you said, is still so potent and relevant to this time, even today, which is amazing. Thank you, Arun, for coming on the show. I appreciate you so much. You share so much great insight, and I think so many people can learn from your experiences and from your thoughts and ideas. So I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great speaking with you and catching up with you as well. Love your show.
Same. Thank you. All right, that's the end. Thank you guys for watching. Stay blessed, and remember, education over everything. Bye.